this section, we'll be dealing with variable types. In every section, you will have a slide with the learning outcomes. I'm not going to talk about those now because sometimes I would rather have some class discussion or have you think about, some concepts, and that would kill the suspense a little bit. But what you can use those for is when you do revision, you can actually check that you've mastered the important concepts. So you could see, do I know the precise definition of a categorical variable? And then you tick, and so on. So use this for your revision as a checklist. So there are two types of variable. A variable can be either categorical or quantitative. Categorical variables place individuals into categories or bins, some people would say, and these are not described by meaningful numbers. Quantitative variables, they take numerical values, and not only these values need to be numbers, they have to be meaningful numbers, and one way to check that is to check that the arithmetic operation, like averaging, are going to make sense. We'll see a few examples of that. So our first example is the variable temperature. I'll let you think for 1 second. So it's represented by numbers, and it's possible to calculate the average. So this is going to be a quantitative one. Now, sex can take two values, which are going to be male and female. And even if you were to represent those by numbers like 1 by male and 0 for female or vice versa, the average wouldn't make sense. So that's going to be a categorical variable, right? And note that for quantitative variable, it's important to specify which unit you're using. Otherwise, we don't know how to interpret the number we get. For example, if you're talking about temperature, it's important to specify if you're using Fahrenheit or Celsius, or even maybe Kelvin. So, why is it important to be able to recognize if a variable is quantitative or categorical? Well, this is the summary of everything we will do in 1041. And as you can see, what you do depends on two things: the number of variables you have and the type. So let's say you have only one variable and you know it's categorical. And let's say you want to represent it by a graph. This tells you this is the type of graph you should use. If you want to summarize what happens for, let's say, two variables when one is categorical and the other one is quantitative, and you want to summarize this with numbers, this tells you that you should be using a 5-number summary for each group, and so on. So it's crucial that you are able to recognize the type of random variable. And personally, I really like this little table, which gives an overview of everything we do in MATH1041. And it really tells you what tool you should be using in your toolbox. It depends on what you want to do, on the number of variable, and on their type. And so now I gave you the definition. We're going to be practicing that, and the way to do this will be to play a Kahoot together. The brand of computer purchased by a customer. Is that categorical or quantitative? Well, when there are no numbers, you don't really need to think very much. If there are no numbers, then it's going to be categorical. Question 2. The price of a textbook. So the price of a textbook not only is represented by a number, but this number makes sense when you want to use it for operations, like, for example, calculating the average. The numbers on basketball jerseys. So this is the one that gets most people. These are numbers indeed, but their average, for example, doesn't make sense. And the jersey with 25 does not indicate that this person is 2.5 times better than the one with the number 10. So these are really labels. Really, if you knew the team, each number would correspond to one person. So in that sense, it's just a label. The height of a 1-year-old baby. Quantitative. The values are numbers for which the arithmetic operation makes sense, like, for example, averaging. So 1 for male, 2 for female. So 1 for male, 2 for female, these are numbers, but the average doesn't make any sense. And this 1 and 2 don't have any specific meaning. You could swap them, so they are really only labeled. So it's a categorical variable. The body temperature, if you measure it in Fahrenheit. And I put a picture in Celsius, sorry. Well, it's actually something quantitative. The fact it's in Fahrenheit or in Celsius doesn't change the answer. These are numbers for which arithmetic operation makes sense, and in particular the average. Quantitative, no doubt. One before last, zip codes or postcodes. So these are the numbers you write when you send a mail through the post office, and these don't have any particular meaning. You can't add them, you can't average them. So really, they represent, so for example, 2035 represent Maroubra, which is a suburb in Sydney. So it's really a label. So it's categorical. Last one. The level of satisfaction of the UNSW students on a scale 1 to 6. That's what you will feel at the end of the term. These are numbers with on a scale, they can be compared. The average makes sense. Well, I hope it does because it's calculated and then given to me, so it better make sense. So that's the end of this Kahoot.